Hello everyone, thanks for watching. My name's Webster and I'm making this video called Tending for Trauma because I'd like to try and share some of what I've learned personally, professionally and spiritually over my life about how to look after ourselves and maybe help look after others who are suffering trauma. Trauma is a big subject, and trauma gets often divided into acute trauma, an immediate threat to our survival, or chronic trauma, which occurs when there is repeated episodes of perhaps relatively small incidents, but they build up and they accumulate. Right now here in Australia, a lot of people are dealing with acute trauma, being involved in the bushfire crisis that's ongoing, fearing for their lives, fearing for the lives of others, fearing for property loss, actually enduring loss of friends, family, acquaintances, people who have died, as well as an enormous amount of property loss, houses, businesses, community facilities, etc., etc. So what I want to do in this video is to just talk a little bit about what happens to our body and mind when we experience trauma, and also, most importantly, give some ideas, some simple tools that we can use to try and help ourselves and others who are suffering effects of trauma. So, the impact of trauma on us is immediate, it's often intense, it's dramatic, and it activates an instinct in us, a survival instinct, which is called the fight-flight trauma. The fight-flight instinct. We either want to handle the threat that's coming towards us, do something about it, annihilate it, stop it, fix it, or we want to run away, which may be the most intelligent thing to do, to flee. Obviously with the bushfire, a lot of the time we have to flee. And this is an instinctual response in us to survive. It's been with us ever since we learned to stand on two legs. It's there in animals, it's there in other beings in the world. Insects even want to avoid death if they can and survive. So what happens in our body is we get a rush of adrenaline, we want to do something, we want to fix it, we want to handle the situation, or we want to escape the situation and run away. And these effects on our body and our mind often stay with us for a long time. As well as fight and flight, there's also something called freeze, where because of the shock of the trauma, we actually freeze a little bit, or we numb ourselves, we go into shock, we don't know what to do, we may end up paralyzed, we may end up emotionally numb, not being able to feel much of what's going on inside us at all. We may be unable to talk about what's happened to us. And this is another impact. Fight, flight, freeze. So our body reacts often in an overwhelming way, which is very difficult to process and understand. And it takes a long time for us to even begin to calm down, slow down, and in a way come back to an equilibrium, a state of balance in ourselves. And of course, if we've suffered intense trauma or accumulated chronic trauma, this can play out over days, weeks, months, years. What our mind tends to do with trauma, especially after the event, is to go over it and over it to try and work out how we could have handled it better, what we could have done differently, and how we could stop ourselves being exposed to that threat again. That's part of the reason the brain wants to keep going over it. That's why survivors sometimes suffer from something called survivor guilt. Why couldn't I have handled the situation better? Why couldn't I have handled myself better? Why couldn't I have helped others better? So that again is a normal survival mechanism, wanting to understand what happened to us and wanting to work out how to fix it. But of course we can't fix it, it's already happened. And often when we're dealing with things in the natural world, or perhaps sometimes even in the real world, we don't actually have that much control. We can't work out how to stop things happening again, even though we desperately want to. And we ask other people, we ask leaders, politicians to try and fix it so it doesn't happen again. And they could be doing more than they are, as we know, but at the same time, we are left with the effects of the trauma and how to deal with them, and there's no easy answer. So part of our survival mechanism is also to avoid being in touch with pain, avoid being in touch with threats to our survival, avoid thinking about difficult feelings, difficult memories, and we want to move on, run away, seek escape, perhaps in drugs and alcohol, perhaps just in TV, reading books, anything to take our mind off the uncomfortable after effects of trauma. And indeed, sometimes it's really good to just relax in some way and whatever we can, distract ourselves, watch a movie, watch TV, talk to people about whatever, in order to give ourselves a break. We desperately need that after trauma, and it's a good thing to do. But still, there'll be a lot of times when we're on our own, when we'll need to just be able to tolerate the fact that our mind is scrolling through stuff, images, memories, feelings, sounds, sensations, and often we're feeling tension, tightness, uncomfortable sensations and feelings in our body. So as an alternative to the fight-flight, which we can't stop ourselves doing that, but something that we need to practice in order to try and help ourselves and help others in dealing with the effects of trauma, is instead of avoiding and running away from it, running away from the effects on us, is to actually, in a counterintuitive way, learn to, what I'm going to call, and what a Buddhist teacher called Tara Brach in USA, she calls tending and befriending. This is quite a radical idea, that instead of running away from, instead of avoiding, instead of working out problem solving, trying to fix feelings, uncomfortableness, memories, we actually try and care for them in a way, befriend them in a way, so that we can begin to slowly calm ourselves and learn to survive in a way which is sustainable, which even though the pain hasn't gone, loss, pain, grief of losing loved ones, losing property, losing livelihoods, isn't going to just go away. We can learn to handle it and not let it continue to dominate our life. And obviously this isn't something that's quick, it's not something that's easy, it's something that's counterintuitive to actually sit with, listen, be with, in a non-judgmental way, our feelings and the feelings of others. And yet, many people who've worked with trauma in psychotherapy, in body work, in meditation, and other sorts of healing have found works a lot better than trying to numb ourselves further through perhaps drugs and alcohol, perhaps even prescribed drugs sometimes, and can begin to help us get in touch with a sense of regrowth. Just as the bush here in Australia begins to grow back extraordinarily quickly after fire, still the effects of the fire can be seen for a long time. They remain for a long time, and yet some growth is happening. So the first thing I want to talk about is sense of contact, communication, listening to ourselves, but also listening to each other. Just the act of listening, just the act of sitting down with another person and sharing a little bit about how we're feeling, asking how the other person is feeling, just paying attention, listening with feeling, with our heart as well as with our head, not trying to fix anything, not trying to make the other person feel better, or if it's about us, we're not necessarily just trying to make ourselves feel better, we're just tending, we're paying attention, we're listening. And listening is a gentle thing to do. Trying hard to listen often means that we get caught up in trying to think about, analyze what's being said. Listening means feeling what's being said. There's a story, words are being used, and yet there are also feelings being communicated. So the value of just talking, the value of just listening, the value of being heard and listened to is something that needs to be done again and again and again. And of course, counterintuitively, we may not want to talk. We may not even want to listen. We would instinctually want to try and avoid it, run away, talk about something else. And of course, yes, there are times when we need distraction to do something else, to occupy ourselves. That's essential. But we also need this time when we can listen with feeling to how others are feeling, to their stories, in a gentle way, in a caring way, and in a non-judgmental way. So the second aspect of this that I want to talk about is how to do that with oneself, because we can't be with other people all the time. There are always, even if it's only in bed, in the middle of the night perhaps, when we're on our own, when we're encountering feelings, sensations, memories going on inside us. How do we deal with that? How do we handle that? So again, I want to use this idea of tending and befriending. So rather than running away, we have to be willing to practice, and we may only be able to practice in small periods of time, a few minutes, just to tolerate accepting, listening, and being in touch with ourself. Not just being caught up in the thinking process of analysing, trying to fix, worrying, our anxiety, etc., etc., but actually trying to be in touch with what's going on in our whole being. And of course, this also means our body, very much our body. The effects of the adrenaline rush that we would have experienced in trauma is often felt and resides in the body as tension, leftover tension. One of the things that happens is fight, flight, and we also can freeze up. And that means we tense up. The tension can be superficial, in the layer of skin, in the muscles, in the tendons, in the ligaments. And it can also be deep down inside us. We can feel tension in our chest. We can feel tension in our diaphragm, sometimes in our belly often. And remember, we don't really want to feel this. Our brain says, no, run away. Don't feel this at all. Let's avoid it. And yet if we avoid it, we are leaving it behind to fester, and it doesn't go away. There's a classic image of making compost in the garden. If we just leave it sitting there and don't turn it and bring air into it, the compost actually becomes rotten, starts smelling, doesn't turn into life-giving compost that will help the garden grow. So just right now, I'd like to invite you just to give yourself permission just to relax and let go a little bit and just become aware of your body. Just take a few deeper, like having a sigh, relaxing down, letting your awareness, letting your attention include your own body. How is your body feeling right now? Can you let yourself feel what's there? Can you let yourself feel tension if it's there in the jaw, in the neck, in the shoulders, or perhaps an ache or tightness in the heart area, in the chest? Still allowing ourselves to take some slow, gentle breaths through the mouth is a great idea. Relaxing our belly, letting our belly be out, and just being aware on the level of sensation what you are actually aware of, where the tension is. Just to let yourself feel how you are feeling. Not trying too hard. If you can't feel much, just notice that. Just notice that perhaps it's not easy to feel sensation. Perhaps you could start even by noticing feet are on the floor perhaps, or your buttocks, your back are being supported by the chair, and just feel the pressure from gravity of your body sitting in the chair, leaning back. Sitting quietly like this is not easy. Someone told me the other day about how they normally eat in front of the TV, and someone recommended to them try eating in a mindful way, no TV being on, and they found it quite difficult and quite strange just to sit there and be with themselves. So we may need to practice this. It's a good idea to practice this over and over again, perhaps in small moments, perhaps in quiet moments. Perhaps even when there are people around, to just let yourself be quiet and allow yourself to feel levels of sensation that are going on. And when we feel safe, even though perhaps we won't feel totally safe, to begin to also let ourselves acknowledge how we're feeling. Yes, we may feel grief. Yes, we may feel loss. Yes, we may feel sadness. Yes, we may feel pain. And rather than reacting to that sadness, to that grief, to that pain, by wanting to avoid and run away, to practice just being there very gently, very calmly, as we would reassure a child, or we would care for a plant in the garden. We don't want to do anything dramatic. We just want to look after how we're feeling, to look after those sensations, to look after those feelings of sadness or loss. To let ourselves be with those feelings in a gentle way. And yes, it may be overwhelming to start with, it may be really difficult to start with, and we may just want to get up and distract ourselves. And that's okay. Be gentle with ourselves, let us do that, and then perhaps slowly find a way we can come back and do it again. Have a cup of tea, light a candle, be in a place where you feel calmer and more relaxed, perhaps sitting under a tree, perhaps sitting in the garden, perhaps just sitting in your favourite chair, perhaps just sitting in bed. But to slowly and quietly begin to practice tending and befriending those uncomfortable feelings, those uncomfortable sensations, even those uncomfortable memories that we still have, noticing that they're there, allowing them to be there, not fighting with them or trying to get rid of them, but staying in touch with our body, letting ourselves breathe, letting ourselves accept and tolerate in a gentle, kind way, to give ourselves some time and some space where even in a very small, even in a very quiet, almost immeasurable way, the possibility of healing can begin at some level. In the same way we can't force a plant to grow, we have to tend it, we have to water it, we have to give it some sunshine, we have to give it some protection sometimes. And slowly but surely it will grow. And practicing tending and befriending, even though, remember, part of us doesn't really want to do that at all, slowly we begin to learn to cope in a relaxed way, in a calmer way, with the suffering that we have felt, that has occurred. Even with being with another person. I heard someone say recently, I just want someone to be around. They don't have to say anything. They don't have to do anything. But it's nice sometimes just to have someone around which feels relational, which feels companionship, which feels supportive. But notice nothing much is happening. It's just tending and befriending in a quiet, gentle way. And we can do that with others, and we can also learn to do it with ourselves. Again, remember, I'm not suggesting this is easy. I'm not suggesting this is simple. I'm not suggesting it's something we'll get instant results from. But if we can practice repeatedly, slowly we can begin to find a space in ourselves and also help others find a space where we can be in a place that's not dominated by despair, but begins to give us a sense of something which is perhaps like a candle flame that's there somewhere, that's like a few drops of rain when there has been no rain, where there is the beginning of growth in the tree that has been burnt, or the land which appears barren. Just by breathing, not judging, not trying to fix it, but tending to our trauma, tending to our feelings, tending to the sensations. Thank you for watching, and I wish you all the best.